All right, we're back. I'm gonna look in the camera for this one. I haven't done it the other ones, but with another overtime episode 29, and this time we're doing a little something different. First time on the podcast. We're talking about a TV show. We're talking about the Chucky, the Chucky TV show on Sci-Fi and USA too, which I assume USA owns Sci-Fi. But the Sci-Fi episodes I think are longer. Like I think the Sci-Fi episodes do like behind the scenes stuff. There's always like 30 minutes or like a 15-minute chunk that's like behind the scenes. But anyway, Chucky season 1 that's on Sci-Fi or USA, and I can't really rank it because I don't have a number ranking for that shit. But I think I liked it. There's some stuff that is iffy, but all around, I mean, it's Chucky. I think um, we have the discussion all the time about who's on that horror Mount Rushmore. And the last Leatherface episode, we talked about how we thought Leatherface should be on there. But there is a very strong argument that it should be Chucky on there. Because, I mean, you think about it, and I think Homie has, like, arguably the best trilogy with Child's Play 1 through 3. The Andy Barclay trilogy, because then Four's Bride, I think, right? And he's not in that. But yeah, and so it's a Chucky TV show. I think it's all right. It's not perfect by any means, but neither are any of the movies. So there's a dog walking around. But yeah, spoiler warning for Chucky, season 1. Gonna ruin everything about it, so you've been warned. First off, so Don Mancini, back creator of Chucky, and then I think he started directing them around Bride. I think Bride or Seed was the first one he directed, but he wrote all of them, and he co-created or created Chucky all by himself. And there was a big thing with that Child's Play remake where he had no involvement, and I think they asked him to be an executive producer, and he was like, no, because he had his own trilogy going on. There was God, what was the first one? The last one was Cult of Chucky, which was in the asylum. And then what was the other one called? Hold on, I'm gonna grab the box set real fast, guys. What was that other movie called? Curse of Chucky. That's right. So yeah, you had Curse of Chucky, and then Cult of Chucky, and then they took the rug out from under him, and they went and made that remake. And so that trilogy he was making with Nika and Andy is in it, and all that, it just got done away with. And so I know that he had said he wanted to do a TV show, but I don't know if he would have done it if that Child's Play remake hadn't have come out. So I wonder if this was the plan all along, because what shocked me about the show is Nika, who is the main character, of the last two, isn't a big part in this show. I mean, she's in it, but like I thought this whole show was going to be about Nika, because the last time we saw her, fucking Chucky like put his soul into her and shit. And so I was like, oh, well, this must be about Nika. But it's not. I mean, she's in it, but she is like one of the... Same thing with Andy, because I expected Andy to be doing more. And I think maybe he pops up in like 4 episodes maybe, but he's not like a giant part. He plays like a little part. Yeah, and I was just surprised that for the show, it's like a whole new cast of characters. The main character in the show is named Jake Wheeler, who is like he does this really weird sculpture art, which, I mean, some can argue that all art is weird, but his is like extra weird. And he buys Chucky at a yard sale in the very beginning of the show, and he's like, "Where'd you get this?" And she's like, "Oh, I don't know. It must have belonged to like her son, who I think went to college or something." And he's like, "Okay," and he buys him for cheap. It was like $10 or something. He buys Chucky, and then as they're walking away, you hear the woman go, "Oh, that's weird. Someone took the chef knife or whatever." And I was like, Chucky. But yeah, and so we have Jake. We meet his dad, played by Devon Sawa. Devon Sawa making his third and fourth appearance on the show in this, because he plays Jake's dad, who the story is like their mom died. I can't remember how it was a car crash, I want to say, but it might have been cancer. It was one of those. But so now he's like just a drunk, fucking dad or whatever. And he's not really like, I don't know, when we first get here, he's just a drunk, and maybe he's a little rude, but I didn't get like a super abusive father thing from him. But yeah, and Jake makes these statues out of fucking just crazy shit, and I think he was planning on using Chucky for one of his statues. And then that night we get introduced to Junior, who is Jake's cousin, and then Junior's dad, who I can't remember his name, is also played by Devon Sawa. So that's why I said his third and fourth appearance, because he's pulling double duty. And spoilers for a little bit later on, he pulls a beer fest where one of his characters kicks the bucket. So then he's he's with a completely different character. But we meet them, and like we have this really awkward dinner where Junior is like this accomplished what do you call it? Long runner? Is that it? He's a runner. It's at school or whatever. And throughout the show, we learn, a lot more about his dad used to be a runner. And, like, his dad is really pushing Junior to, be a runner and all this shit. But, yeah, we have this really awkward dinner where, like, Junior's like, yeah, we all know you're gay, Jake. Like, out of nowhere. And, like, Jake's dad is like, he ain't gay. You don't know what you're talking about or whatever. And his parents are like, yeah, shut up, fucking Junior. And then, like, it just keeps it's awkward and awkward. Junior's talking about, like, all the awards and scholarship offers he's getting or whatever. And Jake is like, I made a statue out of doll parts today. He doesn't have a southern accent, but yeah, and then eventually, I don't remember what sparks it, but someone says something and it pisses Jake's dad off, and he's like, get the fuck out of my house, and he like walks off, and so they go leaving and shit, and Jake does the classic where as they're driving off, he's like, flips him off, and I was like, oh, nice, and then when Jake goes back inside, his dad now is just in like this drunken rage, and he's just destroying Jake's statue, and I don't remember, he's like, you're a fucking loser or something, or stop being a weird, he insults him, which, to be fair, I remember as I was watching it being like, yeah. But yeah, he destroys the statue. Throughout episode 1, I think this happened in episode 1 too. Some of this might be a little blurry because I haven't like rewatched it. I watched it each week it came out. But at some point we get introduced to Lexi, who is Junior's girlfriend. and she Lexi has this weird thing that where she bullies Jake all the time, but yet she's friends with like this dude Devin, who is, some would say, almost equally as weird as Jake is, because he's super upset. All these horror things nowadays have to have someone who has a podcast, or like a true crime expert or something. And part of my problem with Devin's character is he's all about true crime and knowing all these murders and horror movies and everything. And when this Chucky doll shows up and murders start happening and shit, never once is he like, oh, hey, wait a minute. Like, and then later on in the show, he ends up just looking up and he finds the whole thing with Charles Lee Ray kills, you know. And I was like, well, how the fuck didn't you know about that to begin with? I mean, that's not something that you forget easily about this dude who supposedly put his soul into the body of a good guy doll and shit. But yeah, so Lexi doesn't like Jake, but she's friends with this dude Devin, who Devin tries to make buddies with Jake. And you know, throughout the show their relationship grows and, you know, and all that good stuff. But yeah, episode 1, surprisingly, like every now and then I think Chucky, you would get like a scene of him like moving his eye or some shit. But I was surprised at how long they kept Chucky from moving, if that makes sense, or doing anything. Because everyone going in there, everyone knows Chucky. Like, I don't know. I kind of just expected him to be doing shit from the very beginning. But he doesn't start to talk until maybe 40 minutes into episode 1, where they're doing this, like, talent show at school. And Lexi is the host. And she gets up there and starts to, like, talk shit about Jake. And then finally from, like, the back, because Jake had left Chucky at home, finally at the back you hear, like, hey, Lexi! And I was like, oh shit, it's going down. And Chucky just starts, like, roasting the school. And he's like, hey, Lexi, you fucking whore. He doesn't say it like that, but he makes jokes about her. He, at one point, they make Jake get up on stage and hold him like a because they think Jake is just doing a ventriloquist act. And he starts roasting everybody. He like calls out Junior's mom, because he's like, you know, everyone's got secrets. Isn't that right, Cecily, or whatever the fuck her name was? And you see her like, huh? You know? And earlier in that show, we had caught her where she was in, like, Jake's bedroom on a phone call with someone. And she was like, I gotta go. So I was like, oh, this bitch cheating, you know? Because that's the usual route when someone's got secrets in horror movies and shit. But yeah, he, like, roasts everyone. And everyone's like, Jake, Jake, Jake. And I don't care if you're fucking Jeff Dunham, dude. No ventriloquist act is getting that much of an applause at a fucking high school, you know, when we already see how mean everyone is. And yeah, I was like, what are we doing here? But anyway, episode 1 ends basically with they like go home. Jake and his dad have another argument, and then we hear like the dad being like, "Where's my scotch?" or something, like his scotch is all gone, and the fucking power goes out in the house, and he's like, "What the fuck?" And so he goes down in the basement to where the switcher break is, and Chucky had like cut the wire or something. So when the dude's standing there, he's like, where the electricity is. And then finally, Chucky comes walking out of the corner. And he's like, hey, fuckhead. And then he just throws up scotch on him, like a spray of scotch. and it starts. You like see a skull. There's a shot of like his eyeballs having the electricity in them, and yeah, and then Devon Sawa, Jake's dad, fucking dies. I do think actually, I don't think that was the end of the episode. I think then the cops came and we see the other Devon Sawa Junior's dad come and pick him up, and they like take him to their house, and you see their new room, and I think Jake and like Chucky have their first conversation or something. Um, but yeah, so uh, the Devon Sawa kill, it's over the top, but I thought it was really fun. Just the Scotch vomit electrocution. Um, but from then on out, it's like Jake. Chucky is all about Jake killing Lexi. He's like, she's a bitch. She's got to come. Also, something, I don't watch normal TV a lot. I think the only shows I watch on normal TV right now are The Walking Dead, because for some reason I'm still watching that fucking show. And Always Sunny. But I can't think of any other shows right now I watch. But at some point, fucking TV got wild. And it used to be, I know AMC, I remember when they had it where like you could say fuck one time per episode or something. And I remember Preacher, the series finale of Preacher, they said it twice. And I was like, holy shit. But shit got wild. And so Chucky, it's an R-rated shit. Like Chucky the whole time is like, fuck this, fuck you. You know, everyone's cursing and shit. And it's wild. Um, but yeah, and so Chucky is trying to convince Jake to kill Lexi, and Jake's like, I'm not a killer, you know, and and the whole time, Chucky is like, come on, kid, you know, this is what we all got, and I think it was either episode 2 or episode 3 where he also mentions like, he's like, you know, I got a queer kid. And Jake's like, really? And Chucky's like, yeah. And he's like, and you were okay with that? And Chucky's like, I'm not a monster, Jake. And I was like, you did try to kill him a bunch, and I'm pretty sure you probably called him a lot of mean words in that movie if I go and watch it back. But, you know, um, that was this whole show. That was the only character, basically, that doesn't show up is, fucking, what is his name even? Or her. I think he chooses to be a boy at the end. I remember they put him into a boy's body. I can't remember his name, but he was the fucking, you know, he was the weird guy. I think he had a British accent too for some reason. See, the Chucky was a weird movie. But yeah, and so he keeps trying to convince him to kill fucking Lexi. At this point, Devin has been trying to like become friends with Jake because Jake's more of a loner, and he asked Jake, he's like, hey, why don't you come to this party later? And Jake's like, oh, I don't really want to, you know. And Devin's like, oh, we'll just show up, you know, I want you there. And he finally like shows up to the party. I don't remember why he went, but he shows up. And also at this party, like, Junior and Lexi, like, fuck. But she's like, ugh. Like, she doesn't like it. And she's like, I thought you'd be better than this, you know? And so we get this weird, where Lexi the whole time is being the bad guy here. And you kind of are like, oh, come on, Junior, kick her to the curb. Because Junior is being mean to Jake a lot because Lexi is, and so he's just following her lead. But yeah, he shows up to this party and he's talking to Devin, and they like round the corner and there's a big crowd, and they're like, what's going on? And they look, and Lexi has dressed up as Jake's dad and is sitting there in like the frizzy hair and shit and being electrocuted. And Jake's like, and Jake cries a lot in this show. Um, and he goes like running away. He goes back to Chucky, and Chucky's like, all right, you can do it. And he like gives him the knife. And I think that episode 2 ends with like Jake being like, you know, or no, you know what? That might actually be like kind of the beginning of the episode, because I think that same one, Chucky is like, all right, she's gonna die now, and Jake is still like, I don't know, you know. And Chucky fucking sneaks out of the house in like a Hello Kitty mask, and we see him like walking, going trick or treating and shit. And he goes, oh, also I forgot to mention at the beginning of episode, we have a lot of flashbacks to like Charles Lee Ray when he was younger. In the beginning of the episode, we see Charles Lee Ray as a kid, and he got an apple with a razor sticking out of it. And you see him like look at it, and he can see it, and he still goes to bite it, and then he's like, ah. But then he's like, ah, and I was like, what the fuck? When did Charles Lee Ray turn into like a, you know, like a pain addict or whatever? And I only bring that up because then as he's trick-or-treating, he like knocks on this lady's door, and he's like, hey lady, I'm looking for a party. And she's like, you're awful young to go to a party, aren't you? And he's like, well, fuck you, you know? And so she's like, oh, well, there's a party these school kids are throwing right down the street. And Chucky's like, all right, thanks. Here you go. And he gives her an apple, and it's got the razor in it. And then later we see her, and she's like, bitch, she's like, it was a kid with a Hello Kitty mask and shit. But yeah, and he goes to Lexi's party to kill her. And he, like, comes really close to getting to her, but then, like, Jake stops him or whatever. And then I think they go back home, and Chucky, like, gives him this whole speech about, you know, it's to be killed, or it's to kill or be killed, you know? And then that's how the episode ends. Yeah, and throughout, like, there was a part in there somewhere where, like, Chucky had pulled up Lexi's Facebook page, and Junior came across it. And so Junior's weirded out. He even tells Lexi, he's like, be careful around Jake, you know? And she's like, why? And he's like, just do it. And he can hear, like, Jake talking to Chucky in his room and shit. I'm pretty sure, episode 2 is also, there's a part where they have a maid at their house. And she's, like, cleaning the washing machine. And Chucky sneaks up behind her and pushes her. And she lands on all these knives and shit. And the cops come there again. And they're like, awful weird that 2 people have died around, you know, Jake Wheeler. And, like, Devin Sawa gets really... And he's like, what the fuck are you trying to say about my nephew and all this shit? Or I think they even throw Junior out there. They're like, Junior was here too, you know? But they are able to prove, like, they got home and she was already dead. But yeah. So then episode 3... This is what also... Don't take my word for verbatim, because some of this stuff might happen in other episodes. But I'm going down what I think happened. Episode 3 is like... I'm pretty sure is when Chucky tells Jake about the first time he killed somebody. Because at this point, fucking Jake is like, all right, I'm going to kill Lexi. But so he asked Chucky what his first kill was. And throughout the episode, you'll get a bunch of flashbacks to young Charles Lee Ray, and he's like still a kid. He's probably the same age as he was when he bit into that fucking apple, and he's like going to parties, or not going to parties, but he at his like birthday party and shit. You can hear like news talking about like this escaped killer and you know, and danger, and he's breaking into people's homes and all this shit. And so the killer ends up breaking into Charles Lee Ray's house. And so you're like, oh shit, so his first kill is going to be like on this guy trying to kill them, you know? because he comes downstairs and the guy's like stabbing his fucking dad and shit. And his dad's like, Charles, run. And Charles' mom is there, and she grabs him and takes him upstairs. And Charles grabs a little switchblade off the dresser as they're going in to hide in this closet. And so the killer like makes his way upstairs, and he goes and he's looking around the room, and then he looks at the closet, and he goes over and he opens up the closet real slow, and fucking Charles has killed his mom, and he's like, look, I helped. And I was like, I like that a lot. The little switch, you think he's gonna kill but actually he killed his mom. And the killer's like, you got spunk, kid, I like it. And he's like, if you want to do this shit right, make sure you clean up after yourself or some shit. I don't remember what he said. And then he goes like walking down the road, and he leaves Charles behind. So we see Charles' first kill was this fucking his own mom. And yeah, I like that. So that was pretty good. Throughout episode 3, there's a lot of fucking Jake like tracking down Lexi. There's also the where Jake's parent or Junior's parents, but Jake's uncle and aunt or whatever, yeah, they get called into a meeting with Lexi's parents, who Lexi's mom is the mayor of Hackensack, which is the town they're in. And they sort of like, hey, Lexi's been bullying Jake. And the mom and them are like, our daughter wouldn't do anything like that. And they have video of Jake or Lexi dressed up as Jake's dad. And Devin Sawa, rightfully so, he's like, that's my fucking brother, and so they're like, okay, we'll talk to her about it or something like that. Yeah, and there's one part in this episode where Jake is tracking Lexi. She's running through like the park or whatever, and he's following her, and she's got her hood up and shit, and he's following her, and finally she stops, and Jake runs out to go stab her, and then turns around and it's Junior, and he's like, oh. And he hides the knife behind his back. And Junior's like, why the fuck are you following me? And Jake's like, I'm not, And so once again, Junior's even more like, Jake's fucking weird. But then right after that scene, he does go to Lexi, and he's like, you need to apologize to Jake. Because you dressed up as his dad. That's my uncle and shit, and that's not cool. And Lexi actually does go to Jake's house, and he's like fucking around with power tools and shit. Or he's like sharpening axes and stuff. And she comes and is like, I came to apologize or something. And like he's holding the axe in his hand. And I think you even do like a little where she turns around and she's looking at something. And he like gets closer to her and he's like, But yeah, she apologizes to him. But then, like, when Lexi gets home, her sister is having, like, a meltdown. She, like, fell in love with Chucky when Chucky was at the talent show because she was in the crowd. And so she's like, I want Chucky, And Jake basically sees this as his opportunity to get rid of Lexi because he's like, well, here, you can have him. So he gives Lexi Chucky to give to her sister, knowing that Chucky's whole goal is then he's going to kill her, And so she's like, oh, cool, this doesn't make us friends or anything. And he's like, yeah, no. Also, I think it might have been episode 3 where you learn, like, the fucking, her parents, like, to be fair, she has this shit coming, so I don't feel that bad for her. But her sister draws like a painting or something, and she's like, it's okay, I guess, and it's a pretty good painting, and her dad is like, this is better than anything you've done or ever will do. And I was like, oh fuck. And the mom's like, oh, Richard, and he's like, no, it's true, I'm sick of bullshitting with her, so even Lexi's parents are like getting sick of her shit. But they try to make it as like, oh, poor Lexi. And I'm like, no, fuck Lexi, you know? That's how I feel most of this show is fuck Lexi when they try to be like, Lexi? And I'm like, no, no. But, yeah, so he gives her the Chucky doll. Fucking, at some point in this show, like, Devin, who has gotten closer to Jake, um, is like warned by his mom, who is the cop who's been working all these fucking cases or whatever. His mom is like, I don't want you hanging around Jake because there's a lot of death that's been following him around and shit. And she has very weird vibes, which, rightfully so. I mean, two people have wound up dead around him. She had also, she was the one that went and talked to the lady who bit into the razor. And the lady described what the person who gave her the apple, and she described like Chucky. And so the mom knew that was Chucky's doll. And so she's like, oh, Jake must have given her the razor or whatever. But yeah. And so so that night, Lexi throws another party, and it's one of these fucking like hipster ass, which I guess it makes sense because instead of getting a bunch of noise complaints and shit, they all have the Bluetooth headphones. They're synced up, so they're all listening to the same music, but they're all and so there's no sound. But they do that, so then later they won't be able to hear what's going on. There's this other random character that pops up that like Lexi is clearly fancying more than Junior at the moment, and Junior is like feeling jealous and shit. Lexi splits off from the party and she goes to smoke a joint in her room. Chucky ends up ambushing that guy that she was flirting with and stabbing him like on the second floor, and you can see everyone dancing, but they can't hear him like yelling as he's getting stabbed. Also, also before that happened, Chucky's down like playing fucking Street Fighter or something with the little sister in the basement. And he's like, why don't you kill your fucking sister? He just keeps trying to convince people to kill people. But she's like, Mommy said killing's bad, you know? And he's like, Mommy's a bitch. And so, yeah, he kills that guy. He goes and sneaks into Lexi's room. And as Lexi's smoking, he, like, comes up behind her and grabs her. And she's like, what the fuck? And she looks and sees Chucky. And she's like, what? And, somehow her joint went and flew into a sheet or whatever. And so the whole fucking room goes up, and Chucky's like attacking her. She ends up being able to throw him off, but she's sitting there, and Chucky like picks up his knife, and he's like, I'm gonna get you now, bitch. I think he's like, this is for Jake. And all this fire's going up. There's this cool shot of the fire bursting out of this like the door maybe or something, but it fills up the walkway above all the kids dancing. And so I get like they didn't hear the explosion, but that heat, like you would feel that shit, so it was just, them dancing without noticing. I was like, come on. But yeah, and so I think that's how that episode ends, is with Chucky like just laughing as the fire consumes the room or whatever. And yeah, but then fucking episode 4, he let her go, which I thought was weird, because I mean he had her, she was fucking dead, but yeah, he lets her go, and that episode like starts at the hospital, I believe, where everyone is like, and Jake comes running in, and he sees Devin, who was at the party. And he's like, oh, thank God you were okay. And Devin, who wanted Jake to be at the party, is like, oh, well, now I'm glad you weren't there, so I knew you were safe and shit. And I was like, and somehow the little sister got messed up. But she looked all right. But she was in this special, room. Her parents have money. And so she's in this special room. Junior, I think, is in a little hospital room, but he's not really messed up. obviously they find out later that that one kid died, but then the mom, Devin's mom, the cop, eventually tells everyone that he didn't die by the fire. There was stab wounds. Someone killed him. But but yeah, Jake gets there. He runs into Lexi. Lexi's like, "Your doll tried to kill me or whatever," and she's like, "Did you know about that?" And instead of Jake could very easily be like, "What? My doll?" But instead he was like, "Yeah, I told him to kill you." And I was like, "Why would you say that, Jake?" So she's pissed at him because she's like, "You really wanted me dead?" And like Jake doesn't defend himself there, but then later he's like, "Yeah, I wanted you dead. You're a fucking bitch. You always." And I was like, "Yeah, yeah." But she goes like walking away from him. But then later, she brings up, she's like, "I'm gonna tell everyone," and he's like, "Think of how crazy you would sound if you told people that my doll, I'm the only one that's gonna believe you and shit." So begrudgingly, she has to agree to get along with him. Also, I'm gonna tell this part because I think it might have happened last episode, but I glossed over it. But it might have been this one. Is after Charles Lee Ray, we're back. Another flashback. After Charles Lee Ray, died, or not died. After he killed his mom, he's then at a foster home, and he's like really grown up at this point. He's probably like 16 or something, and so he's like taking care of these like 4 kids, and he's like playing murder with them and all this shit. And there's one kid who is very interested in it. Like, he seems to be the only one who's like paying attention all the time and shit. And as Charles at the hospital, he steps onto like this floor that this janitor just washed. And the janitor's like, "Hey, you fucking retard," or whatever, and he pushes him up against a wall, and he's like, "I'm cleaning this shit up," and he insults him or whatever. So then Charles, like the next day or two, comes and gets the kids, and he's like, "Hey, we're gonna go on a treasure hunt," And so he goes like leading. I think it looks like fucking Lord of the Flies when they would like prance. But he leads the kids, and they're like, "How much further?" And he's like, "We're almost there." And I was thinking he was gonna kill these fucking kids. He was leading them off, and then he was gonna kill them. But as we get out there, we see he's killed the janitor, and he's brought the kids to look. And and yeah, and like most of them get scared and leave, but then there only is one kid left, and it's that same kid who's been interested in all of it from the beginning. And he's like, "Oh, that's good." And then next we go to like a roll call, and they call his name, and his name is fucking Eddie Caputo. And I was like, "Oh shit!" So this kid is Charles' accomplice, who left him for dead when he drove off, and then later, Chucky blows him up in his fucking like shack that he's living in Child's Play. That's the one thing I'll give the show a lot of credit for, is I think they do a lot of good callbacks and stuff. They also do a very good job. If you haven't watched every movie, they do a good job of explaining who people are and what's the deal going on. Mostly for Nika, because I know Curse and Colt didn't come out in theaters. It was like DVD or Blu-ray or whatever. So I'm sure if there was any character that the people were like, "Who is this?" it would probably be Nika. But yeah, I wanted to mention that story because I like the Eddie Caputo, and so yeah, and him and Charles working together from that early of an age. So yeah, they decided to work together. They fucking Devin gets involved too, because Devin all of a sudden he starts to look up Charles Lee Ray, and he finds all this shit about him putting his soul into a good guy doll, and doing also as he's doing this, we see like flashes of known accomplice, and it's Tiffany or whatever, and then like you see a little snippet of Nika at the asylum, and her going missing and all this shit. So he gets involved. Also, at this point, Junior comes along and they're like, we should tell him. And she's like, he doesn't have the imagination. He won't believe us. And so then I think she does end up going, we're looking for Jake's killer doll. And Junior's like, if you don't want to tell me, just don't tell me. Don't make up some story. And he goes walking off. And she's like, see, I told you. But so Devin, Lexi, and Jake get together. They're like, we got to kill Chucky. So they go searching for him in this hospital. Um, and or no, before that even, I think Jake and Lexi go to Lexi's house, who is like, it's like half burnt down, you know, and her parents are pissed at her. We get more scenes at the hospital of Jake's adopted or step, you know, what Junior's parents, but Jake's caretakers, sure, why not? And Lexi's parents like arguing about shit, and that's when the mom drops the thing about how the one kid was stabbed. Um, but they go to Lexi's house to look for Chucky because they didn't find him there, and they like go upstairs, and that's when we get the whole where Jake is like, yeah, I wanted you dead and all this shit. And then she's like, Jake! And she falls back and she's like holding on to the thing. And then Chucky is down there on the ground. And he's like, yeah, let the bitch fall, Jake. And he, you know, he's like, kill her. And he's like, I'm not like you, Chucky. And so he pulls Lexi back up. Chucky is fucking burnt to shit, by the way. He's like all melted on one side and shit. So I don't know how he got so fucked up, but he didn't kill Lexi in there. That's just weird to me that she's still, you know, alive. As they're in there, this cop comes in, and he's like, "What the fuck are you kids doing in here?" And they're like, "Oh, we were just, you know, looking around or whatever. It's my house, you know." He's like, yeah, well, it's not safe or whatever. And then he's like, oh, hey, this is that doll because Lexi's little sister had woken up and once again was like, I want Chucky, you know? So he gets the Chucky doll and he's like, oh, this thing's fucking ugly, you know? And he leaves and they're like, hey, no, wait. But he, you know, walks off without listening to him. The cop takes him back to the hospital and I can't remember if he kills the cop or if he just runs away from the cop. But he ends up going into like this random other room where this male nurse or doctor comes walking in. And as the guy comes walking in, Chucky takes a bunch of needles and just starts stabbing him. And this dude has the worst fucking death. He's like, oh, as he's getting stabbed. And Chucky stabs him a bunch. People come walking in. They see the guy with all the fucking needles and shit. Chucky's in the back, still all burned up. And he, like, flips off Jake and all them. And that's how episode 4 ended. So episode 5 is when we get introduced to Tiffany. Tiffany comes back. Which they tried to, like, not let you know it's her at first, where the episode starts and Charles Lee Ray, now he's like looking like Charles Lee Ray. He's got the long hair. I talked about it a little bit at the end of the Horror Express episode. But Charles Lee Ray in these flashbacks is played by Fiona Dourif, Brad Dourif's daughter, who she also plays Nika. But they put prosthetics on her so she looks like her dad. And they just have Brad Dourif doing her lines. So she just mouths them. And then, you know, it still sounds like Chucky. But I talked about is like, there's scenes where she's like walking around and it's Charles Lee Ray, but she's got this dump truck ass. And it's like, it's just really funny. Like, watch Charles Lee Ray and then you're like, you know, like, look at it. It's but Charles Lee Ray and he's at this fucking bar. He's watching this one lady, like, she's making out with this guy and then she bites his lip. And bites it hard, like drawing blood and all this shit. And he's not playing it. So he leaves. And then Charles makes his move. And she's like, you don't want any of this. And he like grabs her by the throat. And he's like, yeah, I do, you know. And so, throughout this flashback, like, she has red, so he calls her Red, and she has red hair, and she doesn't talk like Tiffany at first. She talks normal, okay, and then at some point they're like fucking, and then they bring in this blonde chick, and who you're like, oh, that's Tiffany, you know, but Chucky ends up stabbing the blonde chick, and Red is there, and she's like, oh, and so she gets in on it, and they kill the blonde together, and the euphoria of killing this lady is what makes Tiffany's voice change pitches, and she's like, oh, now she talks like Jennifer Tilly, you know, and so and that ends with like Charles Lee Ray being like, you know what, Red, you look better blonde. And then the next time we see her, she's changed her hair color to blonde. Which is, I can't remember if, I could have sworn she had black hair when you see her in Bride or whatever. I know Tiffany the doll has black hair, but I mean just her as a person, as Jennifer Tilly. I thought she had black hair in the, or maybe that's because then Tiffany does later possess Jennifer Tilly's body, and I remember Jennifer Tilly had black hair then, I think. So maybe that's what I'm thinking of. But yeah, so that was, so Tiffany's introduced. Fucking the little girl is asking where Chucky is the whole time still. We're back to the present now, and Lexi's little sister is still like, I want Chucky. And the dad is there, and he's like, I don't know, hon, And she's like, no, I want Chucky. And so he's like, okay, and he pulls him out, and it's all burnt Chuck. And she's like, And so then the next scene is Chucky getting tossed down this fucking medical chute or whatever. Later, skipping forward a little bit, there is a sad ass scene of the little girl. They get her a new good guy doll, and so she's there in bed. Also, fucking Lexi like smashes it over the head a bunch to make sure it's not Chucky, and she's like, okay, it's good. But she's at night, and she's like, all right, good night, Chucky, and she's going to sleep, and then out it's like raining, and Chucky's at the window all burnt. And he's like, he's not crying, but I like to imagine he's crying. And I like that scene of Chucky watching her with, with a new Chucky. But, yeah, Chucky gets washed down a chute. He lands in a bunch of needles. And he's like, drugs, He's like, this is the good stuff. Also, this episode is when we learn, if we go back all the way to episode 1, when, Chucky called out Devin Sawa's wife for having a secret. It wasn't cheating. We find out she's going to her therapist, and she has like grade 4 terminal cancer or some shit, and she hasn't told anyone, and so that's her secret. And I was like, oh shit, that wasn't the route I thought this was going, And she tells her therapist, she's like, I keep wanting to tell everyone, but it's just so hard and shit, And so, yeah, I was like, oh, fuck. Like, I thought it was going the cheating route, and then you'd have a reason to want her dead, But no, it was like, oh, I got cancer. And I was like, oh, fuck. Near the end of that episode, we go and we finally see, for the first time, it's Jennifer Tilly, who is Tiffany, and then Nika, who is still possessed by Chucky's body. And they're making out, like, on the bed and shit. And then as it pans out, we see they have a guy tied up. And, his mouth is taped, and they're watching it all. And as they're like, Chucky and Tiffany have, like, an argument. And then I can't remember what even happened. But something happened to a Chucky doll in, like, in Hackensack or whatever, and that caused Nika to like black out for a second, and then she wakes up and now she's Nika again, and she's like, what the fuck, and so she crawls over the guy, and she's like, what day is it? And he tells her the date. It turns out, so this is 2 weeks, I believe, after Cult of Chucky. She's like, it's been 2 weeks. And so she's like, and she can't walk either, because if Nika is, handicapped. because of Charles Lee Ray. He like stabbed her mom's belly when she was pregnant, and that's what the whole. And he raped. I think Chucky's the dad too. Like it was a whole dark thing. And she unties the guy, and she's like, "I'm not gonna hurt you, you know." But rightfully so. I mean, the guy is still like, "This ain't." So he fucking knocks her out, and he unties himself. But then later, like as he's escaping, we learn that was like his downfall, because then Chucky is able to take over her body again, and Chucky and Tiffany get him tied up, and then as Tiffany leaves, Chucky and Nika's body is like, "Hey, let's not talk about any of this Nika business, okay?" But then he's like, just to make sure, and he kills that guy. Also, I forgot to mention, I can't even remember what doll they got, but they got some doll. It must have been Burnt Chucky. And Lexi and Devin and fucking Jake stomp him the fuck out. And they kill him. And they're like, "Yeah, we killed him, you know." But this is after we had seen him staring through the window at the other doll and shit. So then that night they go to an assembly, and they're like all in high spirits because they think they've killed Chucky. But the lady is like, "All right, now principal whatever." And she doesn't come out, and then her head comes rolling out, and the curtain opens, and her body's sitting there, and so the principal's dead, and this makes it, they're like, "Fuck, how isn't he dead?" And then like once again, Jake is at that crime scene, so they're still skeptical about him. But then I think it's the very next episode or something, they arrest like the history teacher or something. It's this lady who has only had like a few scenes in the whole show, but they arrest her, and they're like, "It was you." And we only get one scene of the mom being like, "Yeah, your fingerprints were on, the stuff." And she's like, "I fucking work here." I was like, "Yeah." But yeah, it just seemed out of nowhere that they arrest that lady. But, it is whatever. So, episode 6 has a great opening, which is this car stopping at this house. These people get out, and they're wearing suits, and they, like, put guns in their back pocket, or, in the back of their pants. And they get up to the house, and it's Andy, who we had heard his voice in episode 1. He called Jake and was like, "Is this Jake Wheeler? Don't trust Chucky," or something, and he hung up. But it's Jake, and it's Kyle, who I had totally forgot about, but I think she showed up at the end of Cult of Chucky. But yeah, Andy and both played by the same actors. And Andy and Kyle, and they go to this family's house, and they're like, "Oh, we're with the government here to do a census or whatever." And so they walk in, and they're like asking these questions and shit. And then Kyle is trying to play it smooth, but Andy is like, "Have you gotten any new dolls recently?" to the little girl. And they're like, "Why do you need to know that?" And he's like, "Oh, it's just something to get the kids interested in the census, because they count the dolls and shit." And so they're like, "All right, we'll go get your dolls, sweetie." And so she brings them out, and no Chucky. And so they're like, "Is that it?" And she's like, "Oh, wait, one's missing. Where's Charlie?" And they're like, "Oh, shit." And so they're like, "Why don't you go, find Charlie?" And so the little girl comes out, and it's Charlie. And there's a great scene where Charlie goes, "Hi, my name's Charlie. Do you want to play?" And I thought that was good. And then the little girl like hugs him, and then as she's hugging Charlie, you see somehow he's gotten a knife, and he's looking at Andy, and he's like, "This is because of you," or whatever. And he goes to stab her, but Andy just straight up fucking shoots him in the face, and Kyle and Andy stand over him and just fucking and fucking Chucky is like, "Fuck you, Andy," and he's getting shot. And it was I like that opening. I like what Andy and Kyle have become. They're just this fucking Chucky hit crew. Um, and that was good. As they drive away, we get some little they talk a little bit. Kyle mentions how Andy kept a Chucky head in his house and would burn him and shit, and he's like, "Oh yeah, thanks for taking care of that." So I assume that they killed um the real, because the whole thing is Chucky's soul is so splintered at this point. It's like, who's the real Chucky? Because I seem to remember that Chucky head Andy had was the Chucky. Like, was it Seed? Where Chucky gets mailed to Andy, and then he opens the box, and he's got the shotgun. And so that's the head he had. But apparently Kyle, and he's like, oh yeah, thanks for, so he just went off the deep end a little bit, I guess. But yeah, this is when Andy mentions to Kyle about Nika, and how, there's worse things Chucky can do than kill you, which is, he took over her body. They stop at like a gas station, but then as Kyle goes to get back in the car, Andy locked it, and he's like, I gotta do this, and so he just leaves her at this gas station and drives off. Throughout the show, by the way, I haven't mentioned it that much, but the three of them, Lexi and Devin and Jake, have become like this tight circle because of what's going on. So they're always texting each other and talking to each other. And so Junior, this whole time, is getting further and further away. He also, whatever happened in the fire, he got fucked up to the point that he can't run for a while. But his dad is like, hey, I'm going to get you back in there. I'm going to pull some strings so you can go to finals, and all this shit. But yeah, and so Devin tells fucking Jake and them about Andy Barclay, who, is a kid, and if anyone though, and so Jake's like, Andy, I got called by a guy named Andy, and so they like find his phone number and they call him, and they're like, Andy's like, you're still alive and you know about Chucky, you're one of the lucky ones, And so Andy's like, we're in Hackensack, and or Jake says that, and Andy's like, all right, well, I'm coming or whatever. So they call Andy to be like the Chucky expert or whatever. We go back to Nika and Tiffany at some point, and they're like, they've chopped the guy's body up into a suitcase and they're trying to pack him, but it's not fitting, and so Chucky and Nika's body is like, you need to chop him smaller or whatever. And somehow, like, cutting off the hand splatters blood onto his face. And so once again, she goes back to being Nika. And she's like, what the fuck? But once again, she's paralyzed and shit. Also in this episode, there's a flashback of Charles Lee Ray and Tiffany when they're younger buying a car, and the salesman's like, I do have to tell you that the couple who own this were killed in the vehicle. And they were like, how? And he was like, decapitation. And Tiffany's like, nice, we'll take it. And then they end up just like killing that guy. They kill him, they slice his throat, get in the car, and even though the guy's dying, he's like, 2,500 as he's fucking dying. And I thought that was funny. I was laughing at that. Also in this episode, finally, Devin Sawa's wife tells him that she has cancer. She also tells Junior, and Junior already this whole episode is like, I'm not gonna sit like this. That looks dumb. Junior, the whole episode is like getting more and more depressed, kind of, and so now his mom's like, I'm dying, We go back and Nika and Tiffany are playing poker, and Chucky is like, it must be my lucky day, because he won like a pot or whatever. And Tiffany is like, do you remember when we went to Niagara Falls for a honeymoon and shit? And he's like, yeah, And she's like, why don't you tell me what your favorite part about that is? And so Chucky is just like, my favorite part was being with you, you know? And Tiffany's like, I never took you as the sentimental type. Uh, but then she's like, or isn't that right, Nika, you know? And Nika's like, she's like, what did I do wrong? You know, is it the way I talked or or some shit? And she's like, no, Chucky never chews on his nails. And she's like, And then Tiffany's like, plus, I stabbed you in the thigh 10 minutes ago and you didn't even wince. And I thought that was pretty funny. Yeah, so Tiffany somehow is like, you know what? I kind of like you better than Chucky, so I'm not going to hurt you. Don't worry about it, you know? And so Tiffany just kind of lets Nika be Nika. She does like tape up her mouth or whatever, but you know, you got to do what you got to do sometimes. Also, at some point in this episode, Junior goes and talks to Lexi, who it seems like the first time in forever that they've actually talked in the show. But they go to talk, and Junior's like, I feel like everything's falling down around me, you know. He's like, my parents, you know, school, you and me and shit. And she's like, no, you and me are good. And then he's like, no, I'm breaking up with you. So what? Came out of nowhere, but he breaks up with her. And I was like, okay, you know. Then like it's Tiffany buys a house, and it's the house that Charles Lee Ray grew up in, I think. Or no, it's Nika's house from Cult of Chucky or whatever. And she buys that house, and she's like, we're gonna start a family, you know. And then probably the best kill of this movie happens when Junior is with his mom, who's going to therapy. And he's like, what do you talk about in there? And she's like, you know, stuff we don't talk about at home. And she's like, Junior's like, why don't we talk about it at home? And she's like, I don't know, honey, you know. So she goes to therapy. She tells the woman how she told her family, and she also tells her that she's going to refuse treatment. She's like, I could walk out here and get hit by a bus. You never know what could happen. I just want to spend what time I have left with my family and, not worry about all this medical shit. And so then as she leaves, Chucky has snuck into the building, and he's like pushing a cart towards her. And it's almost like the babysitter kill in Child's Play, where he crashes into her and she falls out the window. And Jake like looks over because everyone's looking, but then she lands on the car he's in, of course, and her face like goes through the windshield. He's like, "Mommy," and so then they're like, she killed herself or whatever. But that was a pretty good kill. Also, at some point, I think it must have been, maybe it was the episode before. I don't know if Jake and Devin have made out at this point, or kissed, or whatever. Yeah, I think they kissed at the end of episode 4 after they killed Chucky. They were like riding their bikes, and then they kissed or whatever. But they're kind of a thing at this point. Devin's mom is now cool with him because she arrested the teacher, so she thinks Andy or Jake is clear of these crimes. And so she she tells her son that she's cool with him coming over. Also, we get a scene where fucking Devin is watching Cape Fear, which is a great movie. We're going to cover it one day, the Robert De Niro version, where it's that scene where De Niro's doing fucking pull-up or push-ups, and he's got that music, and his back is framed with the big cross and everything. It's a great scene. But yeah, and so the whole point of him watching that is because fucking there's a part at the end when they're setting up a trap for De Niro, and they have like all these strings and all this shit. And so Devin sets up the house like that. And so he's like, so we'll know if Chucky... And they're like, well, why don't we just have the security system, on? We have a security system. And Devin's like, we don't want the cops coming. He's like, I don't want my mom knowing about this, and all this shit. So they wait for Chucky. Chucky shows up, and he like sneaks in. He gets to Lexi. He like tries to tell her to kill Jake. He's like, Jake tried to kill you and all this shit. And she sees Jake coming up from behind, and so she's like, yeah, and she just like killing time. And she's like, you want to know how I would do it? And Chucky's like, duh, and she's like, I'd beat him to death or whatever. But then that's like the cue, and Chucky, or Jake goes to hit Chucky, but he like moves or something. He just moves out of the way. At this point, Devin's mom has showed back up, and Chucky goes running out into the hall where the mom is and like jumps on her. She's like, oh shit, and now she sees the doll, and she goes falling down the stairs, breaks fucking neck. The mom's dead. Which Andy had told the kids that Chucky will go after everyone they love. And I think only one of the parents live in this whole show. I won't spoil who yet, but so he kills like all the fucking parents. Which, that's just some thug shit. So he kills the mom, and that's the end of episode 6. Episode 7, they kind of like break up the band, if you will. They're like, maybe we should just stop doing stuff, and maybe he'll like, leave us alone or whatever. I don't even remember what Devin's going to stay with his aunt or something for like and I don't remember where she lives, but he hasn't left yet. But that's the only family he's got. But the weird thing is thinking about, he never leaves in the show. I don't remember, so I don't know what happened to that whole I'm gonna stay with my aunt thing. But fucking Jake at one point in the episode, there's more stuff in the episode, but Jake like packs a bag and he's gonna leave, but then he ends up coming back because of like, I think he finds a good guy doll at the train station, and so he comes back because he's got this good guy doll, and it's all this shit. But Lexi is like, what, you were just gonna leave? That's kind of selfish, don't you think? And he was like, why? And she was like, you're just going to leave your family? And he's like, I don't have any family. And she was like, oh, what about us? And so she's like, me and Devin are your chosen family. And I get, like, I'm not saying if someone is a bad person, in their life, that they can't change and be a good person. But it's been, like, fucking 3 days since Lexi was dressing up as his dad and doing, and like doing all this shit. And I was like, the whole thing with Lexi's character is they make her like this good person, but like it doesn't seem like she ever had to really earn it. It just sort of came, and so I don't know. But also it's so earlier in the episode we had the funeral for Devin Sawa's wife. And as they're at the funeral, Junior like comes up to Jake and he's like, "This is all your fucking fault. All this happened when you showed up." And he like punches him in the face, and Devin Sawa's like, "Get the fuck inside, Junior," and he like tells him off or whatever. As they're standing outside, Tiffany pulls up, and she walks up to Devin Sawa and is like, "I'm so sorry for your loss," and she kisses him, and like, Devin has this where he's like put in a trance or something, and it's this whole weird thing. Which this whole time I was thinking, because this is Jennifer Tilly's body, she's in Jennifer Tilly, and I was like, are they doing the? But then in the final episode, they even have her come up to like do a speech, and they're like, Oscar nominated Jennifer Tilly, and so it is her, and so I was like, no one recognized. But yeah, she kisses him. Junior sees it all, so he's like mad that his dad's kissing this lady and stuff. And then Tiffany just gets back in the car, drives away, and she's laughing and all this shit. Back in the past, we see this whole where Tiffany and Charles are in Chicago now, and like they might have been in Chicago the whole time, but this is like City, Chicago, or Prime. And they order this pizza, and they kill the pizza boy and shit. And then at some point, Tiffany comes home, and Charles has killed this lady without her. And she's like, "Nah, you're killing without me." And it's like classic, because usually it's like, we never do anything anymore. We never, normal relationships. But Tiffany is like, well, you never take me out killing anymore. You're always killing people, but and so they're bickering and shit. Um, and yeah, so that's all going on. um, fucking uh, Junior Devon Sawa's dad is like drinking now, and we went down the road with his brother, where his brother's wife died and then turned into that alcoholic dude. And so he's drinking, I think it's even the same shit. He's drinking like the same bottle that his brother was drinking. And somehow Chucky just straight up like walks up to Junior and he's like, "Hey, you should kill Jake and them," or whatever. And Junior is like, "Yeah, okay." And so I think he might kill 2 people. But I remember, so the dad comes and he's drunk and he wants to talk to Junior, and then Chucky starts doing the whole like, "You're a piece of shit" and stuff. And Junior is like holding Chucky in front of him and pushing closer to his dad. And his dad's like, "Stop, stop," And finally, his dad, or Junior's like, "Mom died because of you," or something like that. And Devon Sawa was like, "No, she died because she was a quitter, just like you." And then as he goes to walk off, Junior takes Chucky and just hits him over the head. And then he just beats his dad to death with Chucky's head. And does like slow-mo of Chucky like, like coming down. And he kills his dad. And so Devon Sawa has died twice in this fucking show. Chucky's like, "That's what I'm talking about. It's time someone finally, does what I want them to do." And then as they're like celebrating or whatever, Andy shows up to the house and rings the doorbell. And Chucky's like, "This piece of shit," And also at some point in that episode, the mayor mom is like, "We're gonna have a movie night because everyone's scared and shit, so they're gonna watch Frankenstein." I was like, all right. But that's episode 7. So then episode 8, the finale, starts off with Andy coming in to talk to Junior and looking around the house for Chucky and the dad. And you get a whole bunch of, where Junior's acting all weird. He's like, "Where's Chucky at?" And he's like, "I don't know, my dad must have taken him for a walk or some shit." And then you'll hear like a bang in the closet, and you go look, and in the closet, he's not there. They go in the bathroom, there's a bubble bath drawn. Andy like sticks his hand in there, and you think maybe the body's hidden under there, but it's not. And finally, Andy's like, "All right, I'm going to leave. If, tell Jake to give me a call." And he leaves, and then straight out of my fucking nightmares, Chucky bursts his hand up from the toilet. I don't remember what episode it was, but do y'all remember me talking about how I used to be scared about Chucky stabbing me in the ass when I was on the toilet when I was a kid for some reason? That was a fear I had. And he does it twice, because later in this episode, spoiler, he starts stabbing people in the ass from under a theater seat, which somehow kills them, which I'm not really sure, because everyone he stabbed is like dead. And so I'm not, because if he just stabs him in the butt, like, isn't the butthole, maybe there's I don't know, but he's stabbing people, and I was like, oh my god, this is terrifying. But he hides in the toilet, and he gets away from him or whatever. Tiffany and also last episode 7, Devon got taken captive by Tiffany. And we see that they have a whole army of good guy dolls. And apparently what we learned throughout this episode is somehow Chucky, if he convinces a kid to kill someone, he can grow an army of which I don't know how that all works, but I guess that's so Chucky has this whole mission where they're gonna have all these good guy dolls and they're gonna give one to all these families around, and then the Chuckies are gonna kill everybody and shit. Um, but finally, what happened? Oh, and then Chucky or not Chuck, Jake and Lexi meet up. They're like talking about what they need to do, and then they hear like Chucky laughing, and a Chucky doll who I think it was the one that they got from the train station that they thought was good, but he's not. Oh, it was after the Junior killed his dad, and then that doll came alive or whatever. So the Chucky doll comes and he like cuts this sheet to get to him, but then before he can get in, his head just gets blown off, and it's Kyle, and she shows up and shoots him in the face a bunch. She tells the kid, she's like, "I'm with Andy, you know." And so Kyle takes them. She's like, "We're gonna need guns, all this shit, and a bunch of coffee." But the whole coffee thing, she just put like some date rape drugs in there and knocks them out. And she's like, "I just need to make sure you guys stay safe." Then Chucky also Chucky came back into Nika's body. She's like hiding behind this couch, and Tiffany comes in and she's like, "Oh, Nika, you're hiding over there," and she comes to put her to sleep, but then she gets kicked in the face, and it's Chucky being like, "I'm so ashamed of you, you really thought you were gonna keep me away from this body or something." And he goes to kill her, and he's like, "What is this, the fourth, the fifth time I've killed you now, Tiff?" But before he can, she's like, "You need me, the plan won't work without me, and then I think it's there as they're like arguing, you hear like, "She's right," and you look over and it's Chucky and the doll, and then Junior standing there, and I love it where Tiffany's like, "Oh, baby face, come here," and you see Chucky go, and he runs over and she like picks him up and tickles him and shit, and yeah, that was fun. But she takes them all to the warehouse where they have all the dolls. Devin's tied up there. Chucky tells Junior that he's going to kill Devin. And then I guess this is what... He doesn't feel bad about killing his dad, but he hesitates to kill this kid that was his friend. Yeah, and you get a bunch of, like, Chucky talking to the other Chucky dolls. And then the one Chucky doll is like, "What if there's twins? It's not really fair if people gang up on you, and all this shit." And they're just all laughing and, having a grand old time. Nika wakes up again somehow, and Nika's back. And Chucky tells Junior, he's like, "All right, we need to just do it and kill him, And Tiffany's like, "Oh, but that's part of you, And Chucky's like, "Oh, fuck that, kill her, Junior." And Junior won't do it, so he's like, "Fine, I will." And so he goes to kill her, but Tiffany grabs the Chucky doll and fucking cuts his head off. And she decides, she's going to keep Nika, and she puts Nika to sleep. She sets up, like, these bombs with these trigger traps on the doors for when Andy shows up, and she loads Nika and Junior and her into the car. Junior has kept the Chucky doll, and he's like, "Can I keep it?" And Tiffany's like, "All right, you can keep it, but you got to clean up the mess, And they leave. Later on, Andy ends up busting in, and Chucky is like, "Come on, get up," the head. And his body gets up and starts to walk towards him. But before he can do anything, Andy comes in and beats him up with a baseball bat. And he unties Devin, and Devin's like, "Careful, there's traps." And Andy's like, "Yeah, I figured, But as they're about to leave, fucking Kyle shows up, and Chucky uses a little kid voice to be like, "Help me," And so she opens up the door, and Andy's like, "No, wait." And the bomb goes off, and the whole thing, catches on fire. We go and, like... Lexi and them wake up. They see on the news somehow that like the house blew up, and so they're like, "Oh, Devin's dead," or whatever. And so Lexi like gives him a hug. Jake's sad. He goes home, but then immediately Devin just shows up and like not a mark on him. He's like, "No, I'm good," and yeah, so he tells them what the plan is. How there's a bunch of these Chucky dolls and all this shit. Um, he tells them that Junior killed the dad, and so all that happened. Uh, and so then they head to the theater where like the big climax is of this movie. And before they go in, the mayor lady has like a speech on the steps. And as she's talking, Lexi hears someone behind her, and she looks, and it's Junior with Chucky like holding a knife, and he's like, "Help me," And so he lures her into the back behind the screen, and then he pops out, and he's like got a knife or whatever, and he's like, "I think we should get back together." And as that's happening, this is when I said they introduced Jennifer Tilly, who has all the good guy dolls, and it's for all these sick kids and shit. But then the little sister wants one, and Jennifer Tilly's like, one measly sick kid can take care of himself, and so she gives him or her this Chucky doll. And as they're watching the movie in the theater, Chucky leaves and goes and like gets under, and she's like, "Where are you going, Chucky?" And this is why I say he goes to stab up from under, but it does the thing where the parents stand up and so they don't get stabbed. But then the dad sits down in the seat that just got stabbed, and we don't see him get stabbed, but then later you see, and he's bleeding out of his mouth or whatever. And this is when Chucky just starts fucking stabbing people in the ass, and people are dying. Back behind the screen, Lexi is like talking him to, and she's like, "I was a bitch to you. You were always so sweet," and all this shit. And eventually the Chucky doll ends up going to kill her, but Junior is like, "Don't touch her," and he like stabs the Chucky doll, but the Chucky doll stabs him. And so he falls back, and he's like, "Tell everyone I'm sorry." And I was like, this isn't how apologies, but you killed your dad. Like, I don't know, fucking Junior. Ugh. Like, that kid who played him did a great job of making me hate his fucking guts. And, like, when he's dying, I was like, good. I was like, fuck you, Junior. Yeah, I don't know. But Junior's dead. People run out. Andy and them show up. Or not Andy. Jake and them show up. Jake gets in a fight with Chucky, and Chucky's like going to and he's like, "How you think I have the strength of a full-grown man? It's all because of the power of or whatever the fucking god dude's name is." And I think that's new. I can't remember if they've ever had a point where Chucky could still like manpower people. I thought he was always like doll strength, but I don't know. But he kicks Chucky off, and then he ends up like putting his foot on his chest, and Devin tries to hand him a knife, and fucking Jake is like, "I don't need that. I just need my bare hands." And so he picks Chucky up and puts him on the wall, and Chucky says something about like Devin, and Jake is like, "Don't say that about Devin. He's beautiful." And Chucky goes, "That's gay." I was like, oh, fuck. And so Jake squeezes Chucky's neck, and then his face puffs up and his eyes pop out. And he's like, "Don't say that shit about my boyfriend." Yeah, and so they go walking out of the theater. Where they meet up with Lexi, who tells them the Junior's dead. There's also when we see that Tiffany, who was paying the truck guy to take off or whatever, the truck guy is either knocked out or dead, and Andy has taken over the truck, and he like flips Tiffany off as he drives by, and she's like, "No," And the last shot we see of Andy, he's driving off with this truck. And I think Kyle must be dead, because they don't show her. So I think the show fucking killed Kyle. But as he's driving off, the window behind him breaks, and it's Tiffany the doll. And this is when, because she's like, "Oh, pleased to meet you. It's nice to finally meet you," or whatever. And I realized, oh yeah, Andy's never been around the Tiffany doll, because Bride and Seed it was both two different victims. I think Seed had the one where there was that couple that was really annoying. And then Bride, I don't remember. But yeah, he never met the Tiffany doll. And so she's pointing a gun at him. And she's like, just keep driving. And that's the last we see of Andy, is driving off with this box full of good guy dolls. And Tiffany pointing a gun at his head. And then fucking Jake and fucking Lexi and them, they go to the graveyard after things have settled. We see the teacher who got arrested, who I guess is out now, who she gave the kids a lift, and they go and visit, and it's just the whole fucking family. It's Junior in the middle, it's Devin Sawa's dead body, and then the wife, and like Chucky wiped out that whole fucking family. And they say a few words about like, we keep the dead's memories alive or something, and they have like this 3-way hug. And that's the last you see of them. And then the final shot, I believe, of the season is Tiffany going back home, and she wakes Nika up, and she's like, I just wanted to make sure you never get away from me. And it pans out, and Tiffany fucking has cut Nika's legs and arms off, and she's just a fucking stump tied down in the wheelchair. And man, like I said, I thought this whole show was going to be about Nika. Nika is the saddest fucking character out of any of these movies. Like, just her whole family history. And oh my god, I feel so bad for that lady. And yeah, and that's how season... Well, no, I'm sorry, because then it ends, and then Chucky is sitting there by a fireplace wearing this sweater, or this robe, that I thought was Freddy Krueger colors, the red and green stripes, but I think it was red and black. But it would have been nice if they threw in a little red and green, And he's like, hey, I hope you liked my show, And then he fucking... He does a kill count. If anyone watches the Dead Meat kill counts, he just goes down and he's like, let's see, I killed 2 people with syringes, 17 people with knives and stuff. And so I think it was like 21 or 22 people he killed in the show. But that's how the show ends, with him doing a rundown of all his victims. So, hey, also, Thomas forgot to talk about how when in episode 8 or whatever, we also learn that Tiffany was the one who called the cops, who eventually caught Charles Lee Ray in the Eddie Caputo and stuff when he died. And she called him during that whole thing where she was like, you don't ever take me to kill anybody anymore and shit. So, yeah, I forgot to mention that. And then I was like, oh shit, that seemed like a pretty big thing. So I stopped back in here like 3 days after recording this episode. But anyway, yeah, so Tiffany, what a bitch. Alright. Like I said, I'm going to lounge out for this last part. Like I said, I think I liked it. It definitely had moments I liked better than some. And I grew around to liking Jake. The first few episodes, I was real iffy on Jake. But by the end of it, I was like, okay, But like I said, going into it, I was expecting, Andy or Nika. So this new fucking character was all over the place. Now I just hope it turns out that Devin Sawa has another brother who will be in the next season. Because you think about it, Devin's an orphan now. Jake's an orphan, so I don't know what's going to fucking happen to them. Lexi only has her mom left. So like I said, that's the only parent who was left alive, was the mayor. Yeah. And so I'm interested in season 2. I don't know where those dolls are going to go. Also, it's weird. I was wondering, like, which Chucky doll, like, do they all have the same memories? Do they all know? Because some of them acted like they didn't know what was going on. So it's like, who's the real Chucky? And when will we ever get to a point where Chucky is put back together, But also, I will say, I know some people might not like it, but I grew up with Bride and Seed Chucky. And so I do miss the stapled face Chucky or whatever. Which even in Colt, like, he had hid it under prosthetics or whatever, and she peels it off and sees all the scars. But I guess, the scarred head was the one that Andy was keeping that Kyle killed. Um, but yeah, I do miss the scarred face, fucking Chucky face. Um, but yeah, so I don't know where it's gonna. I guess this is gonna be the future of Chucky as this TV show. I was real glad to see people watching it. I think I remember seeing I liked a tweet by Devin Sawa where it was like the number 2 most watched show right now under Squid Game or something, and I was like, that's fucking huge. Anytime like a horror is that big, it feels good being someone who this is my primary sense of enjoyment is horror movies and horror TV shows and stuff. Um, and yeah, so it was cool that people liked it. Like I said, it's really hard. Like I like a Leatherface, but it's really hard not to put Chucky on that Mount Rushmore of slashers. Um, but yeah, I don't know. Also, I'm gonna look up because now that I'm thinking about it, I think that guy who I said did a real bad job of dying, um, in the hospital getting stabbed by the syringes. I think that might have been Don Mancini. So I'm gonna check real fast. I think he might have made a cameo and got killed in his own show. He does when Chucky's talking at the end. Um, he's like, all the great writers through time, Shakespeare, someone else, and then Mancini, and I was like, um, okay, it was not Don Mancini, but would have been cool if it was. But anyway, all right. Well, I know I probably glossed over some stuff, and it might be some stuff that didn't necessarily happen in the order I said it was, but that basically covers Chucky. So, like I said, go check it out if you. It's on. I don't know what streaming it would be on, but Sci-Fi USA if you have that like on demand and shit. Go check out Cult of Chucky and Curse of Chucky. I don't know how many people actually watch those, but I think they were pretty good. And yeah, and the fact that I don't know. The fact that Chucky throughout the years, besides that remake, like we said, has managed to carry the same story and like the same characters, and it has the one timeline, is really cool compared to all these other series that they fucking rewrite everything and but yeah, there's always a soft spot in my heart for Chucky. That's probably the one that scared me the most when I was a kid. None of them really scared me. But Chucky was fucking scary. Dolls are scary, man. So, I get it's ridiculous that, a little Chucky running at you or whatever. But anyway. Alright, well, thanks for listening to this first TV show episode that we've done here. I don't know when the next time we'll ever do a TV show. I can't even think of another TV. I know we said we wanted to do that Squid Game smoke break, but I don't know if that's ever going to happen. It's been a while. But it might. Yeah, so anyway, thanks for watching. Friday, I don't know what the fuck's coming out. Because we haven't even done the Thing episode yet. So I don't know what Maverick's pick is. But last Friday, a couple days ago, the Thing episode came out. So go check that out. And last week we took a break on shorts. This week there will be shorts, I hope. So go check those out. And yeah. Alright, well thanks for watching. Go check out Chucky. And we'll catch you guys Friday for whatever the fuck we're playing. Alright. Bye guys.